掌声欢迎 Rachel 跟 Rennie。
Let's talk about cushions. Why aftermarket seating? That's what we call it. If it didn't come on the wheelchair when it was manufactured and we're adding it, we usually refer to that as aftermarket seating. So let's stick with cushions for now. We need to think about slung upholstery. It doesn't have to be horrible, but what happens over time, right? Over time, a seat slung upholstery is probably going to give in, especially if it's where we're sitting and it has all that pressure all the time. And once it starts to canopy, I call it, or to sink in, it's going to start affecting posture. So if you're going to use that, if you're going to just keep it as the seat sling without adding in a cushion, we need to make sure we're checking it over time, right? Maybe we can have it tightened. Maybe it's Velcro so we can tighten it, or they can take it back and tighten it. But we need to make sure that it doesn't start hammocking and allowing them to adduct or internally rotate at the femurs, right?
那这种大家可以看到，这种简易的、大众化的，就是在市场上面很流通的轮椅，它虽然说它非常的方便，然后也是取得最容易的，但是对于久坐在其中的人来说呢，其实这些座椅面以及它的背靠这些可能会有所谓的吊床效应，其实对于轮椅使用者都会产生非常多的一个负面影响。
As a review, when we're thinking about seating, we need to remember our seating foundations and seating assessments, right? Just because they're over 65 doesn't mean we forget this part. We still want to make sure that maybe we're doing a MAT assessment, mechanical assessment tool, right? At the minimum, we're checking range of motion. I don't know about you, but very few people, regardless of their age, have full hamstring flexibility. So if I'm going to put them in something where they can elevate their legs but not recline back, then I'm asking them to be able to sit long sitting, right? 90 degrees of hamstring flexibility. How many of you have 90 degrees of hamstring flexibility? Not me. Okay, so we have to check that. We have to check knees, ankles, spine, everything. Function. What is it they need to be able to do? So we can keep that in mind with the seating products we're getting. And we always want to run a risk assessment too. Not based because they're over 65, but we always think about risks when we're getting someone a wheelchair and seating. We want to think about points of control. So how are we maintaining their posture? Where are we trying to address, to mimic or to address that posture, right? We'll talk about that. And we always say that as we do the assessment and as we think about the person and where we need to have those points of control, we create product parameters. I don't need to know every product on the market. Good luck if you try to. What I need to be able to do is say, I need the product to have an ischial well. I need the product to have some, I need it to be tapered. I need it to have great immersion. And then I take that, and then when I meet with wherever I'm going to get the products, I can look and say, which one meets the needs? Which one has the product parameters that I need? There is no perfect cushion for everybody. And I can say this because I work for a manufacturer. If a manufacturer ever tells you that there is, they're lying. okay? Everybody is different, which is why there are so many cushions. Don't find a favorite cushion and put it under everyone. Find the perfect cushion for that person.
好，那这边其实就是第一个部分，在讲说我们在做坐姿评估的时候，一定要先去执行就是 MAT 的评估，再来就是要确认他的这个 RM 的状况，然后接下来就是我们要去找到他的姿势的控制，你是希望怎么样去把它摆位在他的轮椅上之后呢，你得到这些数据之后，你就可以去总结出来你所需要的一个产品参数。你并不需要了解市面上到底有什么样的产品，而是你应该要知道你需要什么样的产品，那能够去满足这个个案的一个需求。就是没有最好的，没有最完美的一个坐垫或是任何的产品，只有最合适的，对于个人来说最合适的一个产品。所以不要就是觉得这个某一个产品、某一个坐垫很好，就尝试把它放在每一个人的屁股下面，这样的话是行不通的。
Materials. We used to, even still, many people, including, I just had to kind of change my thoughts about this myself. We used to always focus on material. What is the cushion made of? Well, this is the best material, right? What did I just say? There's no perfect cushion for everyone. Materials matter because it helps us understand how the cushion might work if it's designed a certain way. But we should never pick a cushion just on material alone, because 2 cushions made of foam, 2 cushions made of air or gel could work very differently than the other based on the design. So we still want to keep in mind materials and how they might influence the cushion design, but it's not the most important thing for us to consider.
那这边在说的就是坐垫，它其实材质种类五花八门嘛。那与其关注在单一材质的讨论上面，材质固然很重要，但是更需要着重在坐垫的设计，然后它的设计会使它呈现出来的一个表现，其实是就算是相同材质或是相同介质的一个坐垫，其实都可能会呈现完全不一样的一个表现。
Instead, the way that we like to start classifying cushions is based on how they perform. Is the cushion meant for skin protection? Is it meant to provide stability for positioning? Right? Which one of these? Or maybe a combination. So we can start to think about how the cushion performs. And we can also look, if you came last year to my talk, at some of the ISO testing that's being done on cushions to give us a bit of guidance.
那我们在这里主要会将坐垫的功能大致划分为这3个属性，也就是皮肤软组织保护、稳定度以及摆位。那因为我们去年其实有做了一个 ISO testing 的一个讲座，也是在就是在坐垫属性上的一个表现的一个测试的一个主题。那其实也是在这3大面向，它可能是需要的是其中之一，或是说它可能是不止其中一个，它可能也可以涵盖2个面向的一个属性。
First, we have to know what our goal is. We have to know the goals of the client. We have to have done an assessment, right? Range of motion, MAT assessment, create our list of product parameters, and create our goals. What are we trying to achieve? And then we need to decide, right? Each cushion, if it's represented by a circle, it's not like they're all separated. They kind of all go together. And our goals might be pressure and positioning. And that's okay. But we need to know where we fall in that graph so that when we're looking at the cushions, we can start to think about how they're working. Are they supposed to help with positioning? Are they supposed to help with pressure management?
那透过我们的坐姿的评估之后呢，我们需要去思考个案的坐垫需求是落在这3个面向中的哪一个位置，或是说是综合的目标也是没有关系的，就是我们需要去判断说哪一个面向对个人来说是更为重要的一个目标。
So let's break them down a little bit more and talk first about skin and soft tissue protection. Most important thing is that, first of all, if it's someone over the age of 65, they have an increased risk of pressure injury. If there's somebody that has immobility, they have an increased risk of pressure injury. So if you're seeing a client that's over 65 that needs a wheelchair, they absolutely have a pressure risk, right? What are we doing to determine how severe that risk is and the other ways we're going to address it? Putting a cushion in a wheelchair does not protect somebody from getting a pressure injury, because they can go, get out of their wheelchair, and sit on a toilet with no cushion for an hour and get a pressure injury. That cushion in the chair is not protecting them when they're out of the wheelchair, right? This is a great resource. We have this international group of people that help us to determine what is best practice around pressure injuries. In our region, it's the Pan-Pacific Pressure Injury Alliance, PPPIA. Okay. There's also the NPIAP, which covers the Americas region and Canada. And then there's the EPUAP, which covers the European part. Notice how they have a U in theirs? That's because in Europe, they still consider it a pressure ulcer, where we, in our other 2 regions, now call it a pressure injury. I think around 2015 we changed that definition. They have this wonderful international guideline they wrote in 2019. I believe they're writing a new one now. And it's about 342 pages. So it's very long. But they have a quick reference guide that is free to download. So I highly recommend, if you haven't already downloaded it, you go to pppia.org and you download it for free. And you look through that quick reference guide. That is best practice for prevention and treatment of pressure injuries. We also have risk assessments we can use. I'm not sure what's most common in Taiwan, but we used to use the Braden a lot. And in Australia, they use the Waterloo a lot. So there's different options you can use, but it's very good to keep in mind if you think someone's at a high risk to run an assessment.
好，就是最刚开始的时候有提到，如果你要给予一个坐垫的建议的时候啊，就是如果说只有一个坐垫，它并没有办法预防你的个案不得到压伤，而是我们其实还要去思考其他的一个平面，它有可能是在它的马桶上面得到这个压伤的，所以呢，其实我们是要去做一个全面的一个思考。那我们其实在网上的资源，国际上的一个资源，非常的丰富。像你可以看到这个 Clinical Practice Guideline， 它是一个国际，就是国际三大 region 一起共同的，在2019年其实有一个版本，然后你们可以上去 PPPIA 的网站下载一个比较简短的这个版本。那也很建议大家可以去就是阅读这个就是像大家现在目前其实都有在接触这些有压伤风险的人，那其实这是一个很推荐的一个资源。那再来就是，如果你认为你的个案它有风险的话呢，其实网上当然也都能够找到非常多的一个像是风险评估量表的部分，那去为你的个案做一个风险的一个评估。
One of you also asked about a client you had that had a pressure injury on one side. I think it was the left side. They were an amputee on the right side. If we're thinking about pressure and pressure management, cushions designed for pressure management are designed in 3 ways. They're either meant to immerse. So what that means is that you can sink in to the cushion. Okay? This is a good example where I can push my hand down and you can see I can sink in. I'm immersing into the cushion. Now, along with immersion, we can also have envelopment. Envelopment means like a hug. Okay? It means how closely the cushion comes and touches all the surfaces of your body that are touching that cushion. Now, the goal of both of these is to increase surface area. I didn't write this formula down, but if we go to physics and we think about pressure, pressure equals force over area. So if I want to decrease someone's pressure, I've either got to change the force, which means put them on the moon, or, yeah, if I put them on the moon, right, they wouldn't have a pressure injury. Since that's not possible yet, I need to increase the area, increase surface area. So when I immerse and envelop, what am I doing? I'm going from just having it touch my bottom to now it comes around my thighs, doesn't it? More surface area, less pressure. That's one way. The other way is offloading. This is commonly done through contours of the cushion. Now, what happens here is that we're trying to take pressure from one area and put it to another area. I'm going to use an extreme example of a tire. If we sat on a tire, maybe a soft tire, if we sat on a soft tire, which has the center cut out, doesn't it? Would there be any pressure on my ITs? No. Why don't we all sit on tires then? Because as we do the offloading, right, we're also decreasing the area. So we're putting more pressure on another area. So offloading can be fantastic. But we just want to keep in mind how much offloading we're doing. A tire is a very extreme example, right? Cushions have contours so that there's still some contact, but it's important that we think about how we are putting pressure on other areas. So for this client, whoever had this client, you know, when you have an above knee amputation especially, you're losing surface area because the cushion should be contacting all of that femur too, right? I'm losing surface area. Now this person, I think they might have had an IT and a GT pressure injury, if I remember correctly. So if I'm going to take pressure off of those two areas, I don't have a lot of area left. So in that case, which kind of option am I going to go for? I'm going to consider more of this immersion and envelopment because they're already limited in that area. If that person didn't have an amputation and it was just on the IT, I really could probably choose either and try. Does that make sense?
好，这边其实解释了三大压力分散的一个概念，就是沉入，然后包覆以及offloading 叫卸载。那这三大面向其实刚才 Rachel 讲的还蛮清楚，就是说，它的最终目标其实都是在于降低压力嘛。那你可以透过增加接触面积的这样的一个方式去达到offloading 的这样子设计的，就是卸载设计的一个坐垫，通常都会有一个曲面式型的一个坐垫，你其实打开来就可以看到，它通常会有一个臀型啊跟大腿槽这样子的一个切割。那这样子的一个坐垫，它其实就在于把 力让从 IT 的地方移到其他地方去做分散，那我们就要去思考那些地方是不是能够去接受这些多出来的这些力量。
Let's talk about stability. We're designed as functional machines. What do I mean is that we work in a chain. If we think about our pelvis as the starting point, the foundation, then every time I move my pelvis, the rest of my body moves along with it.
那刚才他有讲到那个，就是我们人体其实是就像一个锁链、链条这样的一个概念，就是人体其实设计出来作为一个整体来做活动的一个结构，所以当其中有任何的变化的话，那其他部分其实不可避免的也会有一些连带的变化。
So what does that mean, right? It means that I need to give the pelvis a stable foundation. I need to make sure that my pelvis is stable so that the whole chain can be stable. One thing that we usually say in physical therapy school, I think you say it here too, you need proximal stability for distal mobility, right? Look at this little elephant here. Whatever this kid has, I can't tell what it is, but he's got something this elephant wants, right? So this elephant is trying to create stability with 3 points of control to get that object. Now, we can create stability, but we have to keep in mind, when we create it, how are we changing the pressure? So as he created this stable base, he took 1 foot off the ground. 25% of his pressure is now going to the other parts of his feet, right? So it's important that we think about when we're making a stable environment, how are we impacting pressure?
那这边其实在说明的就是近端稳定度的重要，就大家以前一定都有听过这个，就是近端稳定度决定远端活动度嘛。所以这个大象为我们做了一个示范，也就是说，当你今天把接触面积拿掉的时候，那你今天用更少的面积去形成这个稳定度的一个状况下的时候，我们就要去思考它对于我们压力的一个影响跟改变。
And now positioning. Positioning, we have to think about in 2 ways. Are we trying to reduce someone's postural asymmetry, or is that postural asymmetry non-reducible? Now, the old terminology that many of us still use, flexible and fixed, right? Is that posture that they're in, here, let me do this one, the common one. Can they get to neutral? Is it reducible? Maybe not all the way, but maybe a little bit? Or is it fixed? Is it non-reducible? I can't move them from this position. Those are the 2 things I need to think about when we're talking about someone's posture.
那这边是在讲说异常姿势，我们还需要第一个去区分它是可还原或是不可还原的一个异常姿势。以前的话，可能常会使用的是它是具有调整性，或是它是一个固定式的一个变形。那现在我们基本上会使用这样子可还原或不可还原的异常姿势。那其实这也会影响我们后续怎么去处置这一个异常的姿势。
Now, do you think for most of our elderly people that they're going to be able to go into a perfect posture? Probably not. They're probably going to have a little bit of thoracic kyphosis, a little bit of, right, their shoulders coming forward, maybe a little bit of neck flexion. So we need to keep in mind what our goal is. Are we trying to get them all the way to neutral? Are we giving them a wheelchair that's set up at 90, 90, 90 when they're stuck like this? Right? So we need to consider the goals and if we're trying to reduce at all or we're trying to meet their postural asymmetry.
那这边的话，就是在讲说，老人家他们可能就是长者，他们就算我们要让他做适当的摆位，他们也不一定能够回到就是所谓的完全正中的一个姿势，所以我们需要合理的去设定我们的坐姿摆位的目标。那当我们给予一个轮椅的时候，往往都会看到这种90、90、90的一个设定。那我们其实要去想，这样子一个设定是不是真的适合你手上的这个高龄者他的一个摆位的一个状况。
The anatomy of a cushion, right? So we've got different parts of, oh, thank you, Rainey. We've got different parts to a cushion. Some cushions have all the parts. Some cushions only have some of the parts. And that's okay. We need to think about why they are designed the way they are. Ischial well, right? We can see here, if we look even from the side, kind of, we can see that there is this lower space where their pelvis sits. Some cushions have it very obvious. Some cushions, right? Here's another ischial well. Some cushions we can create an ischial well because they have adjustability to them. What is the purpose of the ischial well? To help maintain the position of the pelvis, right? To help give it stability. We're going to talk about it in a second here as one of the points of control for someone that has a posterior pelvic tilt. We also have some lateral thigh supports, right? There's lots of names, but we're trying to rename them all globally. Let's talk about lateral support. If I've got lateral support built up in the cushion, that's going to help my legs from abducting, right? Try to keep them more in neutral. For some people, depending on the type 2, it can help assist with external rotation, along if we use a pelvic belt. We also have the medial thigh support, also formerly known as a pummel. What's that going to do? Help prevent from, can't see I'm wearing a skirt, a deduction, right? Again, trying to keep those femurs in a neutral position so that we can help influence that pelvis to maintain a neutral position. We can also have buildups. So we have cushions that have natural contours like those two. Oops, sorry, Rainey, dropped your microphone. We have some cushions that have positioning parts to them, right? Where we can change it. We can create ischial wells. We can create and help try to correct pelvic obliquities or accommodate pelvic obliquities. We also have pads that can go under cushions. Maybe you guys are like me and I used to just cut foam and create my own. We have other positioning products that we can use, right? There's tons of stuff on the market. Think about the postural asymmetry. Think about the points of control. We're going to go over one here soon. And think about what I need this product to have to address those postural asymmetries and either accommodate or correct, partially correct, fully correct what I'm doing. I'll hold it now.
这个其实就是我们刚才前面有提到所谓的曲面式型的坐垫。那这个区域当然很明显就是给我们的骨盆放在这里面的嘛。那这两侧的话，就是我们的大腿的内外就是支撑，所以它其实是避免我们的就是大腿有就是过多的外转或内转的一个动作。那当然就是除了这样子的一个坐垫之外，你也可以看到就是在这样子的一个坐垫上，它其实也是同样可以做到同样的一个设计，或者说呢，它可以带有一些调整性啊。调整的方法可以有很多，例如像这样子的一个调整，或是说你用其他的摆位配件，因为市面上有的东西真的非常的多，你可以先确定你的目标之后，再去就是找到合适这样子的一个，先设定目标，再去找到适合这样子目标的一个辅具去做运用。
I forgot to add in one part, which I think was a question, which is about how you help to correct someone's posture. If I have a thoracic, if I'm used to sitting in my wheelchair, in my very comfortable thoracic kyphosis, right? If I'm used to sitting in my wheelchair like this, do you think I'm going to be happy if you all of a sudden do this to me? I'm going to last 10 minutes. I'm going to be exhausted because I'm using new muscles. Maybe not new. I'm using muscles I haven't used in a long time to sit in this position. So when you're correcting someone's posture, it might be that you just start a little bit. Think about how long they can sit in that position. One good way to do it is when you're doing that MAT assessment and you have them, you can see, oh, okay, you were sitting like this in your wheelchair, but on the side of the mat, you can sit like this. This is great. And then I time them while I'm talking to them. I just have them sit there and I chat. I like to talk, so it's easy for me. And I start to see, do they quickly start to go like this, right? How tiring is it for them to stay upright? And it gives me an idea about how much adjustment I can do. And it also tells me product parameter, I need an adjustable cushion so that I can make changes over time as they get used to it.
这部分在讲说，我们调整就是姿势变形的时候，其实也要去参考它的耐力啊，或者它能不能够就是维持在这么被你调整很好的姿势的一个时间。就是我们其实可以考虑使用具备调整性的一个坐垫或是任何的辅具，然后去慢慢的进行调整。
New cushions cannot solve every problem. I used to work with a doctor, and they would say, this person has a pressure injury. Just change their cushion. Okay, that will solve all the problems. It's not the only one, right? The pelvis, what did I just say? We're a machine. So we need to address the whole machine. And a back support is just as critical as the cushion.
好，在这边大家应该还蛮清楚，就是坐垫其实没有办法解决压伤问题，不是压伤有压伤了，我们就换一个坐垫就能解决所有问题，所以还是要去找到它为什么会发生压伤。有时候可能是靠背的背靠的问题，那有可能是轮椅的问题，就是不是只有坐垫跟压伤是有直接的关系的。那背靠其实同时跟我们的坐垫是同等的重要。
So let's talk about them next, the final piece of the puzzle. What we know, right, is we have to have all three together. We have to have the correct wheelchair fit correctly for that person, the correct cushion to meet their needs, and the correct back support to meet their needs.
那我们需要考虑的就是，除了坐垫之外，我们要将座椅系统视为一个整体，那同时去考虑背靠跟轮椅的一个适配性。
Let's remember what the ideal spine looks like. We all know it. There are natural curvatures of the spine, which means not everyone can sit at 90, 90, 90.
理想的姿势其中就是要去考虑我们脊椎的一个自然的生理曲度，那并不是所有人都能够做到所谓的90、90、90的一个坐姿。
Now it is true, I can admit, I don't like slung backrests. Okay, I am unfair in my presentation on this, but it's because what happens is they start off really nice and tight, but over time they collapse. And especially with our aged care clients, nobody ever tightens them. They don't really meet their needs, and then they end up with this kind of hunched back position from collapsing into this standard upholstery.
那这种不直的靠背啊，所以背靠，不好意思，背靠它那个不好意思，它其实虽然一刚开始的时候都好像还不错，但其实大家应该都有这个经验，它用久了其实很快的就会变得软塌掉。它虽然看起来好像可以调，但其实真的有去调的人非常的少，所以你就可以看到坐在这样子的一个轮椅上面，会呈现出来的姿势通常都不会太理想。
Especially for my aged care clients, I like to get them a back support, an aftermarket back support that provides them with the correct support they need to continue to be functional and to continue to not have any secondary complications.
那我们其实就可以去思考这样子的，就是硬背靠对于这个族群带来的一些注意效果。那它其实能够去适应或是调整一些不良的姿势，然后提供足够的支撑，避免发生一些就是所谓的次发性的一个问题。
Now, I believe someone asked a question about posterior pelvic tilt. Let's assume that it is somewhat reducible. Maybe not all the way, but we can get the pelvis more neutral. What are we going to do? We need 3 points of control. 1 point is in my back support, right? If I'm sitting in a posterior pelvic, I'm going to use this chair. Don't worry, it's okay. my suitcase is much heavier. If I'm sitting in a posterior pelvic tilt, how are you going to get me into neutral? One way, now pushing on just skin isn't going to really help, right? I need to go to the actual bones. So one way is to push through my PSIS, right? Push my pelvis into that more neutral position. My back support can do that. It can help keep those PSIS in that more neutral position. But if that's the only thing I do, I'm going to slide anyways. I need another point of control. Right here, blocking my ITs from moving forward. A lot of cushions have this built in, right? Ischial well. Or they have adjustability where you can alter them and build that in. I need something to help block those ITs from sliding forward. But I also need something in this direction. Now, when I first started, this was my mistake. Okay? Every pelvic belt, we don't call them seat belts. Okay, they're positioning belts, so we call it a pelvic belt. Every pelvic belt I put on my client I remember saying to the dealer, yep, okay, that's good. You can mount it back there. And the pelvic belt would come at this 45-degree angle. Now, if you have a friend after this, have them get like a gait belt. If you're a physical therapist or occupational therapist, you probably have a gait belt. Or sit in a wheelchair, get some kind of strap and pull on your ASIS at a 45-degree angle, and you will very nicely roll into a posterior pelvic tilt. So there I was trying to prevent my clients from getting pressure injuries, and I was just helping assist them. I was just getting them into a bad position. The position of the pelvic belt should be more at that 90-degree mark, okay? Coming flat across the big bones of the femur. That's my third point of control. Now I've got my PSIS blocked, I've got my ITs blocked from down below, and I've got up above. I'm not influencing my ASIS in a bad way. I'm keeping them locked in. 3 points of control. That's why it's important that I consider all of the parts of the wheelchair.
这边在说明的就是你今天要怎么样去解决所谓的骨盆后倾的一个问题，就是3点控制原则嘛。那第一点当然就是刚才有示范的，就是我们要从 PSIS 从后侧的地方去避免它向后倾的这个动作。再来是从下方呢，我们从这个可以像是用有骨盆倾设计的这样的一个坐垫，从下方去避免我们的 IT 往前滑。那再来最后面有在讲就是这个骨盆带的一个使用，其实传统上大部分都是一个45度。的固定在我们的 ASIS 上面，但其实这可能会促使它更容易有骨盆后倾这样的一个动作。那如果你是想要预防它有一个骨盆后倾这样的一个动作，其实我们更建议你的骨盆带是用一个90度固定在你的双侧大腿骨的根部的位置。那对于这个骨盆后倾的一个改善会更有帮助。
I saw Owen in the front questioning me a little bit here. You can also use, some people use those 4-point belts. That's different then, okay? You can have one straight and one pulled back, especially for someone with a lot of tone. But just because they're old doesn't mean they need a 4-point belt, okay? Aftermarket back supports, depending on each manufacturer, can go on manual wheelchairs, power wheelchairs. A lot of the back supports can attach to the canes of the wheelchair, or sometimes they have what's called an interface plate that can go onto a power wheelchair if it doesn't have back canes. So there's many options. They come in lots of sizes. We're not going to go into this all today, but there's different types of shells, contoured, flat. There's different types of hardware. The hardware is very important. We'll have a slide on that next. And a lot of them have positioning supports that can be included into them.
那这种 aftermarket 的 back support 就是它是那种成品的背靠，那它通常都会提供多种的大小啊，然后它的曲面的弧度啊，然后它的形状啊等等，其实各种市面上有非常非常多种的这种成品的靠背。那它的安装，其实在手动轮椅或电动轮椅上，可以透过我们的那个硬件，就是 hardware 的调整去做到各种的适应各种不同的一个轮椅。那它通常就会有这种。它的安装方式啊，跟模组化的一些调整，然后能够去促使就是个案的摆位。
The adjustability, again, not everyone can sit at 90, 90, 90, so I can use the hardware of the back support to open the back angle, to accommodate for postures, or to accommodate for pain.
那这个背靠的调整，其实能够去透过那个连接的这个硬件，就是 hardware 连接在这个背管的这个上面，然后去调整我们这个背靠的一个角度。
How do I measure for the back support? It's going to be dependent on if I'm trying to stabilize or trying to give them function. Just because they're old doesn't mean they need a super tall back, okay? If they're propelling that wheelchair independently on their own, and I give them a tall back up to their shoulders, I'm preventing them from efficient propulsion. If they are bilateral upper extremity propellers, I need to put that back support below the inferior angle of their scapula. Okay? That's it. If they're propelling, that's what I have to do. If they need a higher back support, probably they shouldn't be propelling the wheelchair then. I need to look at power options. If I'm trying to stabilize, then yes, I can go to the top of the shoulder. I believe someone asked a question about that, which we'll get to at the end here because I can't remember the full question.
这边在讲我们背靠的高度要如何做选择。如果你的个案是一位就是需要自己推轮椅的用户的话呢，就建议他这个就是肩胛下角以下是我们背靠高度。如果在高于这个之上，他需要的支撑这么多的话，其实或许他也不是那么适合去做手动轮椅的推动。所以这是我们判断的一个标准。
So here's some questions that I propose that we consider when thinking about seating and aged care. First one, how much trunk stability is needed to perform their ADLs independently or with assistance? What I mean is, when we're doing our assessment, are we checking their hands-free balance? Are we checking how stable they feel in sitting? If we put them into a wheelchair, also a mistake that I've made in my past, if we put them into a wheelchair, do we check ourselves by seeing if they have hands-free balance? If I've stabilized their pelvis, and I believe this person has the ability to be functional, if I've gotten it wrong, then when I ask them to take their hands up, they won't, right? They're holding on to their armrest, holding on to their lap. If you see someone doing that, maybe we need to make some adjustments, especially if they're upper extremity propelling. Why? Because when you propel a wheelchair, you take your hands off the wheel and grab it again. So if I don't have hands-free balance, what's going to happen? I'm going to have what I refer to as grandpa pushes. I yelled at a client one time. I did yell because he kept pushing his wheelchair like that, and I kept telling him not to. And then I realized it was my fault because I didn't set up his seating correctly, and he had no hands-free balance. So definitely check that. Okay, especially, like I said, depending on how they're propelling. And also considering how they're going to get in and out of that chair as well.
这边的话就是3个我们在评估的时候可以一开始问自己的一个问题。第一个就是他的坐姿需要多少的一个稳定度。那刚才说的是他的这个所谓的坐姿稳定度，是不是他能够坐在这个轮椅上的时候是能够放开双手的一个稳定度？所以如果稳定度不足的状况下，他就会需要用他的双手去增加他的坐姿稳定度。所以这个时候你就可以去确认说这个坐姿稳定度对他来说是不够的，那他就没有办法去做就是我们刚才所谓的有效率的一个推行，所以这时候其实我们应该是去增加他的坐姿稳定度，让他的双手能够去执行更多的一个功能。
Why are they sitting in an abnormal posture? So if I get them out of their wheelchair, I do a mat assessment, and that person has good posture, then it's maybe not them, but it's them in the wheelchair. Right? So I need to think about what's happening. Are they moving because they're in pain? Are they moving because they're not balanced or they don't have the endurance? Or maybe there is a limitation in their range of motion that I didn't see. I need to consider, is it them or is it the wheelchair?
这边的话，就是我们要去思考为什么个案会出现不良坐姿，有可能是因为疼痛嘛，所以他可能会想要变换姿势，或是他是因为坐姿的不稳定性，所以他想要变换姿势，或是真的存在一些 RM 上面的一些问题。那要去思考是这个个案的问题呢，还是他的轮椅不合适造成他出现这样子的一个姿势。
Ask the questions, right? Do we always ask, are you in pain sitting in your wheelchair? If the answer is yes, where? If the answer is that maybe they're in pain sitting on their bottom, maybe I didn't pick the right cushion for them, or maybe I need to get them a different cushion, right? If they're in a lot of pain, maybe they don't have enough surface area contact.
如果他的问题是疼痛的话呢，我们就要去建议他能够考虑使用更能够分散坐姿压力的一个解决方案。
Maybe I didn't give them enough support or balance.
他如果说是他的坐姿稳定度不够的时候，其实就是我们刚才说，其实可以更加去考虑那个视型切割设计的一个坐垫。
Or maybe it's a combination of both. Maybe I didn't give them the support and now they're leaning, which is increasing their pain. Right? I have to think through the process of what could be going on.
那也有可能两者都有，所以这时候就可以去考虑，可以同时满足这两个维度需求的一个坐垫。
I'm going to pass by this one quickly, just to say that, we can build up a cushion on one side. We need to really make sure we get it right. If there's a pelvic obliquity, if it's reducible or non-reducible, because the side we build up depends on that.
那在骨盆的歪斜，其实透过坐垫的一个调整，也就是说我们前面有讲的，它是可还原还是不可还原的一个坐垫的变形，那我们就可以去决定我们要在坐垫的哪一侧去进行就是加高，去增加支撑。
And remember that, especially when we're using an aftermarket back with adjustable hardware, we can open the back support to accommodate somebody. They don't have to sit in that 90-degree position.
那有些人他们其实是需要我们去将这个座椅的背靠的一个角度打开。那这个角度的打开，其实就可以透过这些硬件的调整，然后去增加我们的座椅靠背之间的角度。
I only have 2 more slides. This one is just to show the difference between what someone was given in their long-term care center versus what the right equipment can do. And I just want to kind of end on this to say that giving someone the right equipment at any age is our responsibility. And we have to find ways to make sure, with or without funding, that we can do it.
这边其实就是简单的分享一下，就是说，它在原本的这个座椅系统之中，跟经过调整之后的座椅系统，其实可以看到很明显的不一样。那其实我们可以去跳脱就是补助的一个框架去做思考，就是要去决定说，怎么样其实是对个案是最好的，而不是说就是所有的老人就给他一张一样的椅子。
And this final slide, this is the ICF model, which oh no, this one's slightly different. This one was in a paper, and it incorporated the most important part, which, sorry to the ICF model, they forgot to include, which is quality of life, right? And no, I don't know of a funding system in this world that covers based on someone's quality of life. But we all know the importance of someone's quality of life and how it impacts every single one of these areas. And if we can give them a better quality of life, how does that improve their overall well-being? And how does that actually decrease the cost to us as a society just by increasing their quality of life?
最后的话，这边其实就是在讲这个 quality of life 的这个部分。 那因为老化其实会带来各种生理上的变化嘛，那我们其实也不应该因为他们没有得到合适的辅具，就导致生活质量的一个下降。那其实我们能够透过就是去增进这些老人的这个生活质量，其实反而能够达到整体社会的一个所谓的支出的减少。那这是我们最后总结的一个部分。那所要倡议的一个重点是，不论年纪，我们都应该人人都应该获得最合适正确的一个辅具。
And now we're going to take some questions, but I first want to also recognize Rainey, who I changed a lot of what I was going to say on those slides, and she had to adapt, so thank you very much, Rainey.
好，谢谢 Rainy， 谢谢 Rachel。那我们现在就是要进行最后的这个问答的时间、座谈的时间。那我们现在剩下大概20分钟，我们就把时间交给施老师。
好，那原则上我们先开放现场的问题，因为有些人已经预先提出问题，那我们speaker 也先准备过了一些答案，那一些建议啦，不应该说答案，那所以 case by case 当然会有很大的落差，不过事前提出的问题未必带着影像，所以也没办法确定真正的状况是不是描述的清楚啊。不过先换成会现场提出问题。台湾人的问题就是没有问题，这哦有了，太好了，请。
就是OK 讲国语好，
是
帮我翻译好。就不是因为我还是我想再确认一下那个老问题，因为今天听 Rachel 在讲，因为特别针对就是长者嘛哈，然后我听到他在讲坐宽的时候。我听起来他的意思是，其实没有任何的例外，就是坐宽就是要最适合在几乎是没有空间要预留的状况，所以像机构的这些长辈，因为有的时候我们以往大部分都很特别注意，就是说，比如说搞活动自己手推的，然后或者是儿童的摆位的，我们很重视说，哦，这边都贴得很紧，摆得很好。那像一般性的。也不一定长辈啦，就是说一般性，我们有时候确实是会预留。那这样听起来是不是其实应该基本上都不要留任何的空间，在建议的时候？谢谢。
Yes. Okay. It is common in many countries that I remember someone said one time. 2 fingers on either side of the widest part, and that's the width. But I say no, because any additional width, and what happens? We usually get a pelvic obliquity. The wheelchair, being the correct size, is part of that point of control to help maintain that neutral pelvis. It takes some time to get through it because we always want to have a little bit of space. But what is the purpose of that space, right? Even if we touch their skin, they're not going to get a pressure injury from touching soft tissue. It's going to go all along their femur. Now, if we go really, really small, maybe, but we can actually compress tissue. So sometimes we can take them and squeeze them even in tighter than we think. But if there's any space, they will end up having more pelvic movement. So even with older people, I measure from the widest part to the widest part of their body and choose that measurement.
OK， 有没有不同意见？呀，当然我们有时候那个一寸一寸，那通常是从 textbook 上面看来的，旧版很久以前的 textbook。如果就 pelvic 同意吧哈，就像 1990意思是一样的 OK。不过老实说，如果是以长辈应该刚刚讲一个很重要的观念，就是说压在软组织上不会造成压力太大。 所以如果是合身的轮椅，基本上是 OK， 但是当然我们也不要避免它去直接压迫到我们的 bony prominence， 当然是。那当然，不过我还是有一个想法是说，如果今天长辈的能力怎么样啦，哈，他如果是根本是还做得很好，他只是利用来做 transportation 而已，他可能可以不是整天坐在上面的。那说不定我就不会那么在意它要多合身，所以有一点点 space maybe 是 OK。但如果是今天是要考虑 positioning 这一件事情的时候，它是要整天坐在上面，那可能就要尽量合身一点点是比较好的。所以我们两个看法应该是一致的，只是说在不同的场合上会有不一样的想法。OK， 那我们现在回答一个预先提的问题 ，OK 吗？投靠哪一个？投靠靠不到的问题。我今天还带了一个东西来。OK， 那在 Rachel 先回答之前，我先叙述一下这个问题，用中文叙述一下。一个叫胸椎的那个，这个问题是这样哈，一个严重胸椎后凸，就是 kyphosis 的洗肾个案高龄，3次1周3次要外出4个小时，每次4个小时去洗肾。那目前用躺式轮椅，高背。那目前就是所谓高背，就是那种枕头的那一种的 ，OK， 好，大概那乘坐的时候常常肩膀悬空，因为翘骨嘛，哈，所以肚起来，那也无力维持头部正中，那不断的往左右掉，后面，前面不会左，不会后面 ，OK， 因为翘骨。那他们后来就用了那个调整型的那个魔术带拉紧的拉带，想把它放进去，看起来是好了一点，那但是他的头还是没有好的支撑。那有没有什么其他的建议？可以使用这样子 ，OK。
For somebody with severe thoracic kyphosis, we have to think that gravity is pushing them down further. So sometimes for someone like this, we, especially because they have a reclining feature wheelchair, we recline that wheelchair back enough that gravity helps to bring them down towards the back. Depends on how bad, like how reducible or non-reducible this posture is. So I think that would be my first question is, are you trying to have them drive upright? And for safety in the car, sometimes they recommend this. But if the person's like this, it's not safe anyways. So I would suggest first is making sure we tilt back the chair, see if we can give them more support. Also, sometimes this back is okay because it's just an adjustable tension, but if we chose an aftermarket back support, sometimes we have this desire when someone has thoracic kyphosis to build up at the top to touch them. But when we do this, we push them more forward. So we want to make sure that there is that space for them to work on coming back. This case is quite difficult. I would definitely recommend looking at an adjustable back support off market. I know they said the family hasn't considered that yet, but I think that would be the best option. But you could try, if you haven't already, you could try tilting the chair. And even with an aftermarket back support, I would probably not only adjust it more open, but I would still tilt a chair if I could for this person, which you could do with a manual wheelchair, manual tilt, power wheelchair. Most of them you can have some ways to tilt them back.
刚刚的建议是说，如果你不要去用那些比较好的背靠，可以试行的背靠的话，那至少你可以先稍微打开坐背靠脚，然后让他的身体稍往后一点，看能不能稍微拉直一点点，至少头也不是垂向下的。那当然，看起来在这个提问者他已经有试着要去把他的后面放松，让他把它放进去一点点。那但是头靠得不到支撑。老实说，我会跟 Rachel 的想法一样，就是你要选一个，他们很客气，都不去谈商品哦。我是不客气，我觉得对就是对，不对就是不对。比如说，大概我们市面上台湾有的背靠对这种严重的 kyphosis 的个案， either 是我们的Armadillo， 就是那个 NXT 的 Armadillo， 或者是说Comfort Company 的那个那个 Relief， 他们都是可以调这种 Sagittal Plane 上面的支撑度的。那如果是适当的这样子调了以后，还有一件很重要的事情，当你用了一个 hardware 的背靠在后面的时候，你就有空间可以去发展你的头靠，那你的头靠的角度就可以支撑的深度就可以改变。那如果这些都真的不做，就是只要想要找一个能够靠头的地方，那就请往那一边看。绿色的轮椅上面有一个叫做多功能头靠组，就是你什么背靠都不要用，可是你就是需要有一个头靠可以前后调整的话，那请用康阳的这个多功能头靠组，它也不影响你轮椅的收折。但老实说，它的意义，今天把它带来的目的不只是要解决这个问题哈，就是我们有多少老人做复康，坐在轮椅上，我们现在很在意716-19，可是却没有注意他们坐在上面的 hip press injury， 他们的头是没有靠的。那如果说我们的汽车座椅上面其实是要有枕头来防止你的 hip press injury， 那为什么我们的轮椅上不要？这只是还没有被重视的问题而已。那所以我觉得恐怕我们要好好的来思考，在一些轮椅上面装上头靠的这件事。那当然高背轮椅本身，你要说那是头靠吗？我要说那是枕头，它就是一颗枕头而已，其实它没有办法太大的那些调整性。所以对于这个问题，我的建议恐怕是要好好的从背靠上面加跟头靠上面一起来做total solution的考量，会比较好。OK， 那还有现场要问的问题吗？
Can I add in something?
Okay, sure.
Okay. The other thing we need to think about is positioning in the bed for people that have severe thoracic kyphosis. Some people have medical problems where they're not allowed to lie flat, heart conditions, breathing conditions. So we need to remember that they're likely to develop more thoracic kyphosis. And maybe there's stretches we can do to try to help them. But for some people, they just get really used to sleeping with lots of pillows. So it's important we also look at that because they're sleeping on their bed for a long period of time. So make sure when you see someone with any postural asymmetry, especially older people with thoracic kyphosis, sometimes I find they have 4 or 5 pillows underneath them. No matter what I do in the wheelchair, I can't address it if they sleep with 5 pillows. So I may need to slowly take away a pillow over time, right? Maybe down to 2 pillows.
所以其实刚才也有提到，就是说不要想要一次调整就到位。那其实这也回答了预先提出的一个问题，就是有一个学员他有提出来说，看高龄者已经习惯原有的姿势，摆位后可能因为肌肉酸痛、呼吸较费力等等不适应的情形，对，这恐怕就是一次调太多了。那所以渐进式的调整，或许是我们今天就是要学到的一个新的功课。OK， 那有没有现场的问题？没有，我们要再继续回答这上面的问题。OK， 有吗？他要补充一个。
Okay. This one, it's important to think about slowly making changes, right? That is the biggest reason that they're uncomfortable because they might have sat in that wheelchair for 5 years that way. I think I usually told most of my clients, if it was their second chair, you're going to hate it for the first 2 weeks. Your new chair I get you, you will hate it. Even if it's the same chair, you will hate it because it's different, right? It's newer and you are not used to it. And so I told them, you can come back in 2 weeks and complain. But before those 2 weeks, you have to just deal with it, right? So, but for elderly people, especially if they're in pain, we need to move very slowly. Don't make big changes. Make small changes for them. And if something is hurting them, make sure you think about why. maybe it's not the wheelchair, right? But maybe it's something else that's going on. You know, it could be you can say, have you made any other changes? I had a person one time blame the wheelchair, and I found out they got a new mattress. Well, there it is. So make sure that you ask what else is changing. You know, have they changed their diet? Have they changed their mattress or their chair at home? But make very small changes and ask every time you see them, how were those changes? Was it hard for you? Did you have any pain in the beginning? And make sure they understand too. I made a change to your wheelchair today. It may make you more tired. It may increase your pain for the next 2 to 3 days. If it's beyond that, call me. Come back. See me. Right? If you tell them, if you give them an expectation, then they're not nervous and they don't want to get out of their wheelchair. Okay, Rachel said, I'll be more tired for a day or two, so I can deal with this. You know, otherwise, if you just send them home, then they may just choose not to go in their wheelchair at all. So that would be my suggestion, is always make very small changes, especially if they have chronic pain. Okay? Or sometimes certain people can be more challenging than others. If they have a more challenging demeanor, then small changes, right? Make sure you tell them why you're doing it and you explain to them what you're doing as well.
刚刚 Rachel 讲到很多人的心坎里哈，我想在做第一线的服务的人员，常常遇到一个状况，特别是教育系统的学生，的治疗师们，那个学生从那个国中小一台轮椅换到新的一台轮椅的时候，要是特定一种几个疾病的个案，他们就会特别的敏感。要是换了一台轮椅，他绝对不喜欢。然后就算你同一个型号的、同样规格的给他，不喜欢，因为之前那台已经被他做出形状出来了，他就是没有办法适应，所以他会说 "You will hate it" 好几个礼拜这样子，恐怕不是好几个礼拜，我们有那个 hate 已经快1年了，所以当然我们就是慢慢去找出是不是真的还有什么样的问题这样子。OK， 我们最后一个问题留给现场好不好？还有没有要问？因为我们时间的关系，我们必须要在7分钟内离开这里。OK， 不然我会赶不上火车，跟火车说拜拜。好，对大家客气，想要早点放我们走。好 ，OK， 好。那如果是这样子的话，我们是不是就在这最后一次哦？没有问题哦。OK， 好。那我最后讲几句话了哈。老实说，我们刚刚讲到说，轮椅坐垫背靠，三者缺一不可啦。说真的，就是一个台湾的人已经太习惯用这种折叠式轮椅，只是一块布太久了。那为了板段甲修的时阵，把那个背靠贴起来，付出太多姿势不良的代价。那我们清楚印象很深的就是那一部轮椅，绿色的轮椅，我们那么好的轮椅，然后放着一个柔和的坐垫放在上面，让一个阿伯坐的一直 complain 疼痛。那最后呢，我们就勇敢的把背靠装上去，然后他原本做不到半个小时的那种 sitting 的耐力 ，sitting 的耐力就突然变成4个小时都不会痛这样子。所以3个东西缺一不可啦，对的轮椅的参数，对的背靠跟对的坐垫跟对的背靠系统。那我们再次谢谢我们的 Rachel 那也谢谢来协助我们的厂商。好 ，OK， 那我们的时间就交还给我们的老人福祉协会。
谢谢施老师，谢谢 Rachel， 谢谢 Rainy。